Her deepest sorrow was a home without a child's laughter. We saw the tears, we heard the anguish. We witnessed a mother's dream for her son, Sumit, crumble into dust against the reality of his love for Jenny. Sana Singh, a woman defined by tradition and family, facing the unbearable silence of a future with no grandchildren to carry on the family name. Her pain felt real, it felt profound. But a shocking new report, an exclusive theory pieced together from a source deep within the shadows of Delhi's private family services, reveals that Sana wasn't just praying for a miracle. It seems she was trying to buy one. Before we unveil the shocking details of what we're calling the grandchild gambit, a plot so audacious it reframes everything we thought we knew about the Singh family, I need you to do something. If you want to dive deep into the conspiracies and hidden truths of the 90-day universe, stories the network would never dare to tell you, then hit that subscribe button right now. Ring the notification bell and give this video a like. You are not going to want to miss a single word of what's coming next, because this isn't just a theory. It's the key that unlocks the entire mystery of Sana's bizarre transformation. Let's rewind. For years, the narrative was simple. A clash of civilizations played out in a middle-class Indian home. Sumit, the devoted son, caught between his duty to his family and his love for an American woman, Jenny, who was older than his own mother. The primary, immovable obstacle was Sana. Her objections were loud, they were public, and they were relentless. She screamed. She cried. She threatened disownment. She even threatened to take her own life. The central theme of her outrage, the drum she beat in every confrontation, was the issue of legacy. Jenny could not give her a grandchild. Jenny could not provide an heir to the Singh family. To Sana, this wasn't just a personal disappointment, it was a cultural and social death sentence. Her son was throwing away his future, and hers along with it, for a woman who represented a genetic and generational dead end. We, the audience, were locked into this dynamic. We watched Sumit prevaricate and placate. We watched Jenny endure endless humiliation, and we watched Sana escalate her campaign of emotional warfare. We saw her consult with astrologers. We saw her rally the entire family against the union. We saw her break down in what appeared to be genuine, soul-crushing despair. Her opposition was the engine of their entire story, the great mountain they had to climb. And then something strange happened. The mountain seemed to shrink. The volcano of maternal rage went dormant. Sana's tactics shifted dramatically, moving from fiery, explosive confrontations to a chilling, dismissive acceptance. She stopped screaming and started sighing. She stopped fighting and started ignoring me. She attended their wedding, not with a smile, but with the grim resignation of a woman attending a funeral. At the time, we interpreted this as defeat. We thought the years of struggle had finally worn her down. We believed that faced with the undeniable reality of Sumit's marriage, she had simply given up. She had accepted her fate, a future without the grandchildren she so desperately craved. We, and the show's producers, framed it as a bittersweet victory for Sumit and Jenny. They had weathered the storm and now faced a cold but peaceful sea. But what if we were all wrong? What if her silence wasn't the sound of surrender? What if it was the sound of a new, far more sinister plan being set in motion? What if Sana hadn't given up on having a grandchild, but had only given up on Sumit and Jenny providing one? This is where our exclusive report begins. A source, a whistleblower, who we will call the facilitator, has come forward from a local, highly discreet, and entirely unofficial adoption agency in the Delhi area. This isn't a government-run orphanage. This is a private, underground network that caters to the wealthy and the desperate, a service that operates in the gray areas of the law to solve family problems. The facilitator, whose identity we are protecting for their safety, claims that in the months leading up to Sumit and Jenny's wedding, they were approached by a couple they immediately recognized from television, Sana and her husband, Anil Singh. According to the facilitator, the meeting was shrouded in secrecy. Sana did all the talking, her voice low and urgent, while Anil sat beside her, looking deeply uncomfortable but ultimately complicit. Sana was not there to inquire about a standard adoption. She was there to commission a child. Her request was chillingly specific. They were seeking a newborn baby boy, healthy, and from a family of a similar cultural and social background. She wasn't looking to rescue a child in need. She was looking to acquire an heir. The plan, as she laid it out to the facilitator, was breathtaking in its audacity. They would arrange a private transfer. Money would be exchanged, a significant sum, to ensure the birth mother's silence and cooperation. Once the baby was in their possession, they would not raise him as their grandchild. They would raise him as their own son. Let that sink in for a moment. Sana was planning to present a new baby to the world as her and Anil's late-in-life miracle child. This child, this purchased infant, would become the new true heir of the Singh family. He would carry the family name, he would inherit their property, and he would perform the sacred rites for them in their old age. The plan was a masterstroke of social and familial engineering. It would allow Sahna to save face within her community, to silence the whispers and pitying looks from her friends and relatives. She would have her son, a child to dote on, a new focus for all her ferocious maternal energy. And in doing so, she would render Sumit and his foreign barren wife completely and utterly irrelevant. This theory, this grandchild gambit, doesn't just feel real, it explains everything. It retroactively decodes Sana's bizarre shift in behavior. Her cold acceptance of the marriage wasn't acceptance at all. It was a strategic pivot. Why waste energy fighting a battle you've already decided to bypass? Why scream at Jenny for being old when you're already in the process of acquiring a new family lineage? Her dismissiveness towards Sumit suddenly makes perfect sense. In her mind, he had already been demoted. He was no longer the sole heir, the focus of all her hopes and dreams. He was becoming a relic, a disappointing older brother to the new true son she was about to install. She could afford to be calm and distant because she had moved on. She had a new secret, a new hope, a new strategy that made Sumit's marital choices a mere footnote in her grander family saga. Think back to those scenes. Remember the flat, emotionless look in her eyes as Sumit pleaded for her blessing? We thought it was bitter. Our insider report suggests it was a calculation. She was looking at a man she was in the process of replacing. Remember her minimal interaction with Jenny at family gatherings? We thought it was a grudging tolerance. This theory posits it was something far colder. She was looking at a woman who was no longer a threat, but simply an obstacle that had been successfully navigated around. The war wasn't over, it had just gone underground. The facilitator provides more disturbing details about the plot. Sana was allegedly obsessed with the baby's physical characteristics. She requested photos of the potential birth parents, scrutinizing them, not with the eye of a loving future guardian, but with the cold appraisal of a livestock breeder. She wanted to ensure the child would look like a Singh. She was concerned with complexion, with facial features, with anything that would make the deception more plausible. This wasn't about giving a child a home. It was about curating a perfect prop for her new life, a life in which Sumit was a supporting character, and this new baby was the star. Anil, throughout these meetings, was reportedly quiet and tense. He would occasionally try to interject with practical concerns, but Sahna would wave him away, her focus absolute. This was her mission, her salvation, and she would not be deterred. The financial aspect was also significant. The facilitator claims that Sana and Anil were prepared to liquidate a substantial portion of their savings to make this happen. They were willing to pay a premium for speed, for discretion, and for the specific quality of the child they were seeking. This wasn't a desperate act of a woman in grief. It was a well-funded, meticulously planned operation. The goal was to create an entirely new reality, one where the shame and disappointment of Sumit's marriage were erased and replaced by the joy and celebration of a new arrival. An arrival that conveniently solved all of Sahna's social and emotional problems. This theory paints a picture of a woman far more complex and calculating than the hysterical mother we saw on our screens. That version of Sahna was a victim of her circumstances, lashing out in pain. This new version, the Sahna of the grandchild gambit, is a Machiavellian strategist, willing to emotionally amputate her own son from the family tree to preserve its legacy. She saw a problem, her son's unsuitable wife. And instead of trying to solve it, she decided to make the problem, and her son, obsolete. She couldn't control Sumit's heart, but she could control the family line of succession. If her son wouldn't provide the heir she demanded, she would simply go out and procure one herself. The level of deception required is staggering. It would have meant lying to their entire extended family, their friends, their neighbors, and ultimately to the child himself. This boy would grow up believing he was the biological son of Sana and Anil, a miracle baby born to older parents. He would never know that he was, in essence, a replacement, a stand-in for the grandchildren his older brother Sumit failed to produce. The psychological implications are enormous, not just for the child, but for Sumit. He would be forced to participate in this lie, to call this stranger brother, and to watch his mother pour all the love and affection she had withdrawn from him onto this new, perfect son. It would be a daily living reminder of his failure in his mother's eyes. But the plot, for all its cunning, was not foolproof. It was a high-wire act performed in the shadows, and the shadows have their own rules. The facilitator explains that their organization, while unofficial, still has to navigate a world of paperwork and bureaucracy. They can bend the rules, but they cannot simply ignore them. And this is where Sana's meticulous plan began to unravel. The problem wasn't the money, and it wasn't finding a suitable child. The problem, as is so often the case, was the law. In order to create a plausible backstory for this miracle baby, they would need a birth certificate, a legitimate government-issued birth certificate listing Sana and Anil as the parents. The agency could arrange for a private hospital and a discreet doctor, but faking a legal government document of that magnitude carried immense risks that went far beyond what the facilitator's organization was willing to take on. They explained this to Sana. They could facilitate a private guardianship, a long-term, undocumented foster situation, but they could not legally make the child hers and Anil's. For Sana, this was unacceptable. The entire point of the gambit was legitimacy. The child had to be, in the eyes of the world and the law, a Singh. He had to be their son, not their ward. A private guardianship could be challenged. The child's origins could be discovered. The deception had to be absolute and legally binding. This created a stalemate. Sana demanded a level of forgery and legal manipulation that the agency was unwilling to provide. She pushed, she threatened, she may have even offered more money, but she had finally encountered a wall she could not break through. The agency, fearing legal exposure and potential trafficking charges, began to distance themselves. They informed Sana that without a legal pathway to create a falsified but official birth certificate, the arrangement could not proceed as she had envisioned it. The grandchild gambit was stalling on the runway, thwarted not by a crisis of conscience, but by the mundane reality of bureaucratic red tape. This is where the story takes its next turn, into the realm of desperation and reckoning. Faced with the failure of her primary plan, Sana was forced to abandon the project. The facilitator confirms that the meeting stopped. The money was never fully exchanged. The search for a child was called off. And it's precisely at this moment, with her secret plot in ashes, that we see her on the show, sitting at Sumit and Jenny's wedding, a mask of cold indifference on her face. Now her expression is not one of a woman who has moved on, but of a woman whose master plan has just failed. The coldness is not acceptance. It is the bitter chill of defeat. She is attending the wedding not because she has to, but because she has no other option left. Her secret alternative has been taken off the table, but the story doesn't end there, because secrets, especially secrets this explosive, have a way of getting out. The failure of the adoption plot is the end of one chapter, but it's the beginning of the next, the reckoning. What happens when a son discovers that his mother's love was so conditional that she was actively trying to replace him? What happens when he learns that her desire for a grandchild was not a loving wish for the expansion of their family, but a cold-blooded obsession so profound that she was willing to erase him and his marriage from the family story and insert a stranger in his place? The facilitator, the source of this incredible story, did not just speak out to expose Sana's plan. They spoke out because they claimed to have knowledge of how this information eventually made its way back to the one person it would destroy the most, Sumit. The collapse of the deal with the agency left a trail. There were communications, there were records of inquiries, there were people who knew. And in a close-knit community, information, even closely guarded information, can leak. According to our source, a distant relative with connections to the world of private family arrangements heard whispers of the Singh's unusual inquiries. A name was mentioned, a plan was alluded to, and piece by piece, the unthinkable story started to form. This relative, Brashev, caught between family loyalty and a sense of moral outrage, allegedly confronted a member of the extended Singh family, who in turn, Shrin, felt compelled to bring the horrifying rumor to Sumit's attention. Imagine that moment. Sumit, who has spent over a decade of his life trying to balance his love for Jenny with his duty to his mother. Sumit, who has endured shouting matches, emotional blackmail, and the constant threat of disownment, all in the hope of one day achieving a peaceful compromise. He believes the worst is over. He's married, his mother is quiet, and they are beginning to build a life. And then he is told this. He is told that his mother's silence was not peace, but a prelude to the ultimate betrayal. He is told that while he was fighting for her acceptance, she was shopping for his replacement. The initial reaction would have been disbelief. It sounds like something out of a melodramatic soap opera, too cruel and outlandish to be true. He would have defended his mother, dismissed it as a malicious rumor, a lie designed to tear their already fragile family apart. But the seed of doubt would have been planted. It would explain so much. It would explain her sudden change in demeanor, her coldness, her detachment. It would align perfectly with her years-long obsession with an heir. Every strange look, every dismissive comment from the past few months would flash through his mind, suddenly recontextualized not as signs of resignation, but as symptoms of her secret plot. The confrontation must have been apocalyptic. We can only speculate on the specifics, but based on the family dynamics we've witnessed, it would have been a scene of unimaginable emotional devastation. Sumit, armed with this terrible accusation, confronts Sahna and Anil. At first, they would deny it, of course. They would call it slander, lies from jealous people. But Sumit, for the first time, would not be the pleading, placating son. He would be a man whose entire understanding of his mother's love has been shattered. He would press, he would demand answers, and faced with the details that only an insider could know, the carefully constructed wall of denial would begin to crack. Anil, always the weaker of the two, would likely break first. His discomfort, his guilt, would be written all over his face. But Sana, even cornered, would fight back. She would likely try to justify it, to reframe it not as a betrayal of Sumit, but as a desperate act to save the family. She would cry, not tears of remorse, but tears of self-pity. "What was I supposed to do?" we can hear her saying. "You were destroying our family. You were ending our name. I did it for us, for our legacy." In her mind, her actions were not monstrous. They were necessary. She would see herself as the matriarch taking extreme measures to protect the dynasty, even if it meant sacrificing her own son's place in it. But for Sumit, no justification could ever soften this blow. This goes beyond disapproval of his wife. This is a fundamental rejection of his existence. His mother's love was not unconditional. It was transactional. He was valuable to her as the carrier of the family line. When he chose a path that, in her eyes, nullified that value, she simply decided to procure a new, more effective asset. The realization is existentially terrifying. It means that all the pain, all the fighting, all the years he spent trying to win her approval were a waste of time. He was never trying to win her over to his marriage. He was auditioning for a role he had already been fired from in her heart. He was a son on the verge of being replaced. This knowledge changes everything. It poisons every memory. It taints every future interaction. How can you ever look at your mother the same way again after you learned that she was willing to buy a new child to take your place? It is a wound from which a parent-child relationship can likely never recover. This, we believe, is the true hidden story of the Singh family. The story of a plot so cold and calculating, it makes all the televised shouting matches seem like child's play. It is the story of the grandchild gambit. The emotional devastation of this discovery is almost impossible to comprehend. It rewires the entire history of their family. Every argument, every tearful plea from Sumit, every sacrifice he made to try and appease his mother, is cast in a new sinister light. He wasn't just fighting for her approval of his marriage. He was unknowingly fighting for his own place in the family, a place his mother was actively trying to fill with a stranger. This wasn't a dispute over a daughter-in-law. This was a coup, a quiet domestic coup, where Sahna Singh attempted to overthrow her own son as the heir to the family legacy, and the weapon she chose was a purchased child. Let's dissect the psychology of Sahna after this theoretical confrontation. A normal parent caught in such a profoundly immoral act would be consumed by shame. But the Sahna we have observed for years is not driven by conventional emotions. She is driven by a potent cocktail of tradition, pride, and an almost narcissistic obsession with public perception, or what her community thinks of her. So when confronted, her response would not be an apology, but justification. She would weaponize her own pain. "You forced my hand, Sumit," she would argue, tears streaming down her face. But these are not tears of remorse. They are tears of frustration that her plan was discovered. "You and that woman, you were racing our future. You were killing the Singh name. I was trying to save it. I was doing a mother's duty, the duty you abandoned." She would paint herself as the tragic heroine of the story, a mother so devoted to her family line that she was willing to take on this incredible, secret burden. She would frame the act of buying a child not as a monstrous betrayal, but as a selfless sacrifice. In her twisted narrative, she becomes the victim, forced into this desperate measure by her son's selfishness. This level of psychological manipulation is profound. It's a refusal to accept any responsibility, shifting the entire moral weight of her actions onto Sumit and Jenny. She wouldn't see that she was erasing her son, She would only see that she was trying to write a new, better chapter for the family, and he was simply an inconvenient character in the way. And what about Anil? His role in this is crucial and tragic. We have always seen him as the man caught in the middle, wringing his hands on the sidelines of the domestic war between his wife and son. He is not a man of strong convictions, often echoing Sahna's sentiments but without her fire. Our source, the facilitator, described him as looking deeply uncomfortable during the meetings, a man clearly burdened by the scheme. His complicity is not that of a co-conspirator, but that of a weak man dominated by a powerful wife. He went along with it, not because he believed in it, but because resisting Sahna was a battle he had long ago lost the will to fight. Once the plot was exposed, Anil would be the weak link in their defense. He would be unable to maintain the lie or the self-righteous justification. He would be crushed by guilt, by the look of utter betrayal in his son's eyes. This could potentially create a permanent schism between Sahna and Anil. For years, they were united, at least publicly, in their opposition to Jenny. But a secret like this, an act that so fundamentally targets their own child, would fester between them. Anil might secretly try to apologize to Sumit, to explain, but his weakness would be unforgivable. He stood by and allowed it to happen. He was the silent partner in his son's emotional execution. For Sumit, his father's silence would be just as damning as his mother's actions. Now, let's turn to Jenny. For a decade, she has been the villain in Sahna's story. She was the temptress, the homewrecker, the old barren woman who stole a good Indian boy. She has endured insults to her face, schemes behind her back, and the constant grinding pressure of being unwanted. The revelation of the grandchild gambit would be, in a strange and terrible way, a form of vindication. It would prove what she likely suspected all along, that this was never really about her. It wasn't about her age, her culture, or her personality. It was about her inability to produce an heir. She was not a person to Sana. She was a biological dead end. This knowledge, while horrifying, would also be liberating. It would free her from the burden of trying to win Sahna over. It would prove that no amount of cooking, cleaning, or cultural assimilation would have ever made a difference. Sahna's problem with her was absolute and unsolvable. And when faced with that reality, Sahna didn't try to compromise, she tried to replace. This confirmation allows Jenny to finally close the door on any hope of a relationship with her mother-in-law. It allows her to stand by Sumit not just as his wife, but as the only person who truly has his back against a family that was willing to discard him. The battle is no longer about Jenny trying to fit in. It's about her and Sumit standing together against the fallout of his mother's ultimate betrayal. This insider theory also provides a new lens through which to view their recent on-screen behavior. Think about the scenes after they were married. We saw Sumit beginning to stand up to his parents in a way he never had before. He started setting boundaries. He began to say no. We, the audience, attributed this to the confidence of being a married man. But what if it was something more? What if it was the cold, hard confidence of a man who no longer has anything to lose with his parents because he knows they have already lost him? His newfound spine isn't just about marriage. It's the result of being emotionally liberated by the worst possible truth. When you know your mother was trying to buy a new son, you stop caring so much if she approves of your dinner plans. Every interaction becomes a clue. Watch the family gatherings again with this theory in mind. The stilted conversations, the palpable distance. It's not just the awkwardness of a family adjusting to a controversial marriage. It's the unbearable tension of a family shattered by a secret that is too terrible to speak aloud, yet too powerful to ignore. Sana's forced smiles are not the smiles of a mother making an effort. They are the grimaces of a failed conspirator forced to interact with the son she tried to render obsolete. Sumit's politeness is not the deference of a son seeking peace. It's the cold courtesy of a man dealing with a stranger who happens to share his DNA. This theory of the grandchild gambit is the missing piece of the puzzle. It explains the inexplicable. It accounts for the sudden shift in strategy, the chilling change in Sahna's demeanor, and Sumit's transformation from a pleading boy to a resolute man. The show can only give us the surface, the arguments they're willing to have on camera. But the real drama, the truly life-altering betrayals, happen in the shadows, and they are far darker than anything we've been shown. The story we've been sold is about a culture clash. The real story, we believe, is about a mother's pathological obsession with legacy, an obsession so powerful she was willing to commit the ultimate act of maternal treason. Let's consider the sheer logistical and emotional audacity of the plan. Sana would have had to feign a late-in-life pregnancy. At her age, this would have been presented as a medical miracle, a blessing from the gods. She would have had to disappear for a period, perhaps citing medical complications or the need for bed rest, only to reappear with a newborn. The lie would have to be maintained for a lifetime. Every birthday, every school event, every family photo would be part of an elaborate piece of theater. The child himself would be a living, breathing lie, raised to believe a fiction about his own origins. And what would Sumit's role have been in this new family order? He would have been expected to play along, to call this child his brother. He would have to watch this baby receive the unconditional love and celebration that was denied to him and his wife. He would be a ghost at the feast, a constant, awkward reminder of the family's first failed lineage. His marriage to Jenny would be tolerated only because it no longer mattered. They would be a satellite family, orbiting the new true center of the Singh universe, Sana, Anil, and their miracle son. It's a psychological prison of unimaginable cruelty. The failure of the gambit did not restore the family. It simply replaced one form of conflict with another. The open warfare of shouting and tears was replaced by the cold war of unspoken truths and unforgivable secrets. This is arguably worse. In the old dynamic, there was still a sliver of hope for reconciliation. In the new dynamic, the damage is irreparable. The trust between mother and son has not just been broken, it has been vaporized. Sumit now knows the absolute depths of his mother's obsession and the shocking lengths she would go to in order to get what she wants. This brings us to the future of the Singh family. The show might try to portray them as a family slowly healing, finding a new normal, but with the knowledge of this insider report, we can see that for the lie it is. There is no healing from this. Sumit and Jenny may remain in India, they may continue to have Sunday dinners with his parents, but it will all be a performance. The core relationship is dead. Sumit's loyalty is no longer divided. His mother, through her own actions, severed the cord. His true family is now, and forever will be, Jenny. Sana, in her desperate attempt to secure the family legacy, ended up destroying her own family. The irony is devastating. All of Sana's actions were, in her mind, to preserve the family name and traditions. But her methods were so extreme, so rooted in deception and betrayal, that she achieved the exact opposite of her goal. She didn't save the family, she fractured it beyond repair. She wanted a grandchild to carry on the Singh name, but she was willing to disown the son who already carries it. It's a story of obsession leading to self-destruction, a classic tragedy played out in the suburbs of Delhi. The laughter of a grandchild that she so desperately craved will now be replaced by a permanent, deafening silence, the silence of a relationship that has been murdered by the mother who was supposed to nurture it. This is a story that goes beyond the petty dramas we usually see on reality television. This isn't about catfishing or arguments over money. This is about the fundamental nature of love, loyalty, and family. It poses a terrifying question. What happens when a parent's desire for what a child can provide becomes more important than their love for the child themselves? Sana Singh, according to our insider report, found her answer. She was willing to replace the child. When a son disappoints, just buy a new one. Is this the act of a desperate grandmother, broken by the loss of a dream? Or is it the calculated maneuver of a monster, a matriarch so obsessed with control that she would rather erase her own blood than accept a future she did not choose? The evidence points to a conclusion that is as shocking as it is chilling. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. This is a story of obsession. Share if you're shocked.